Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, let's thank to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has given us mercy and blessing so we can meet again today in a good condition. Secondly, let's deliver salawat and salam upon the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam who has guided us from the darkness into the brightness. The Honorable Lecturer, Mr. Aziz, and all of my beloved friends, good afternoon. We are very happy to have this chance to present the result of our group discussion. We are from Group 3. I'm Lintang Kusuma and my partner is Bu Zahriyanda BENTI SYAM. Today, we will share our group discussion about linguistic theory. It is a book review entitled The Handbook of Educational Linguistics by Bernard Spolsky and Francis M. Hult, in Chapter 5 of the first part, which is written by Richard Hudson. However, for further comprehension, we also search the related materials from other sources, which included in the references section. After the presentation, hopefully we are able to explain what linguistic theory is and find out why education needs linguistic theory, as well as now the linguistic ideas and linguistic models. Well, let's start the presentation now. The first is the introduction. The first part will be delivered by me. Firstly, I will explain the definition of linguistic. What is linguistic? Linguistic derives from the Latin word lingua, which means language in English. Based on the online Indonesian dictionary, linguistics is the science of language or scientific study of language, while Lim 1975 cited in Geoffrey Zalt 2011 defines that linguistic is the study of language. Further, as Danawati Setiawati and Widarsini 2017 stated, someone who studies language theory systematically about the structures of language, language history, comparative languages, and etc. is called a linguist in English. Next, since we are in the education field, surely there will be a question coming up to our mind. Is there any relationship or link between language and education? The answer is yes. What are they? Let's find out. Hudson stated that the links between education and language are fundamental and obvious. The first reason is because language is the main medium of education, and one of the foundations of education is literacy. And one of the most used predictors of educational success is verbal intelligence. The first or second languages are traditionally been an important part of the school curriculum. Therefore, it can be ignored that education has profound effect on language. And this chapter will try to explain why. Furthermore, the methodology used in reviewing this book was the literature review method. According to Zahriyanda 2017, literature review or study contains theories that are relevant to research problems. Therefore, in this section, the study of the concepts and theories used is based on the available literature to build concepts or theories on which become the basic studies of the research. All right, let's move on to the main section of our presentation, which is result and discussion. This part covers linguistic theory, linguistics theory in education, linguistic ideas, and linguistic models. The first two parts will be explained by me. So let's take a look at here. First, what is linguistic theory? According to Kurt Lewin, as cited in Smith 2011, linguistic theories is essentially a theory aimed to identify, formulate, and explain a model of the underlying rules and principles of how things work in language by means of observation and generalization. It can influence the point of view of educators in teaching language so that language learning cannot be separated from the theories put forward by the linguists. Hudson, as cited in Spolsky and Hult, 2008, explained that linguists generally contrast theory and description. It is stated that theory covers more general ideas about how language works and about how a person might study it. While description comprises the details of vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, and other particular languages. For example, how speakers of a language pronounce the word that means dog is a matter of description, but more general questions about how pronunciation is related to meaning belong to theory, as do questions about how to study pronunciation and meanings. This chapter is concerned with theory rather than description, and it will be really helpful to divide theory into two areas, namely ideas and models. We can contrast the ideas that language is constantly changing with the various models of how and why it changes. In ideas areas, ideas can be controversial, but a great many of them are accepted by every linguist and provide a common framework of assumption that allows rational debate at the frontier of research. In contrast, models exist at the frontier of research, so almost by definition, they attract controversy and they are complicated and hard to explain. In short, linguistic models should be treated with caution, but linguistic ideas are tried, tested, and agreed. So, linguistic theory will now mean ideas rather than models in this chapter. The explanation of the language, ideas, and models will be discussed further in a separate subsection later. Well, since we were really curious about linguistic theories, we also looked for additional references about this, and we came across several well-known theories. The division of linguistics, according to Pateda, 1990, as cited in Dhanawati, Satyawati, and Widarsini, 2017, is seen from the angles of the theory that underlie it. For example, traditional theory is the first theory that views language from a philosophical point of view. According to this theory, language is based on meaning, which causes the boundaries between grammatical units to be unclear, resulting in several definitions of word classes. Next, Ferdinand de Saussure, structuralist theory, examined language with scientific principles and is codified so that it can be analyzed using systematic and clear methods. In maintaining their structure, words are classified based on their shape and distribution. The last theory we discuss here is the transformational theory by Noam Chomsky. Hereinafter, it is known as the transformational grammar, and this theory assumes that the language is reflected in the sentence by carrying a number of basic elements and structure, which are divided into two, namely the deep structure and the surface structure. The surface structure is in the form of what is heard or seen, while the deep structure is in the form of an abstraction from what is heard or seen. Chomsky added that in producing sentences, humans have competence about their language and performances in the form of language. Second discussion is about the language theory in education. It is to answer the question, why does education need linguistic theory? First, it is actually related to the knowledge about language or KAL. Carter, 1990, as cited in Spolsky and Hult, 2008, defined KAL as explicit knowledge of facts and principles informed by the ideas of linguistics. Teaching KAL is considered important because a deeper understanding of language brings long-term intellectual benefits, and KAL can improve language skills in writing, reading, speaking, and listening. Next, to answer why education needs linguistic theory, there are several rationales for this. When we talk about linguistics, it deals with the system of language. The first rationale is linguistic theory plays a role in teaching the mother tongue and foreign languages. One rather obvious idea of linguistics is that different languages are all manifestations of a single phenomenon called language. Two, language is fundamental to every subject because it is not just to those subjects where it is the primary object of study. And every subject has its terminology and its presentation style, as in the two new UK curriculum subjects, namely citizenship and thinking. The last, linguistic theory can help to strengthen all the existing language subjects because one of the byproducts of this strengthening will be a much more coherent approach to language throughout the school. Well, I think that's all for me, and for the next discussion will be delivered by Bu Zahriyanda. Well, Bu Zahri, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. Here I will be presenting a brief presentation on linguistic ideas. Based on this chapter, there are several ideas in linguistics. Next. The first one is description or prescription. Prescription and description are two views in observing a language phenomenon. The prescription holds that language must or should be used in accordance with certain rules and patterns, while description is more towards to language with all forms used or acceptable, without relating it to language rules. Descriptive linguists consider the view of description to be more real and important to work on, study, and apply. Okay, the second is variation or uniformity. Geographical and social variations, as well as developmental and historical variations, render the language non-uniform. Good language education embodies variety in all its forms, such as dialects, genres, styles, historical periods, and languages, and encourages students to enrich their language repertoire. Third, form or function. Form and function are combined in each language unit. The two aspects of this unit are different but complementary. For example, in the phrase long garden wall, the word garden describes the same wall as the word long, but the words garden and long have different forms. The fourth, synchrony or diachrony. Synchronic linguistics studies language at only one time. For example, Javanese language during the Dutch colonial period in Indonesia, while diachronic investigates and analyzes language development from time to time. For example, the development of Javanese language from its existence to the present. Fifth, text or system. The system is a regular arrangement that forms a meaningful and functional pattern. Written or spoken text is a language which consists of an orderly element. The two things, text and system, are conceptually different. For example, the language or text used in literary works in the 18th century looks complicated. It doesn't mean that the grammatical system at the time was also complicated. Text, lexemes or inflections. Inflection is the process of forming new words by adding affixes to a word but not changing the class of the word. For example, the word book becomes books. There is only a change in the number, but still in the same class of word, namely nouns. An example of an inflection in a verb, namely studies, studied, studying, still exists in the same class of words, namely verb. The word studies, studied, and studying come from the same lexeme, which is study. Seventh, sounds or letters. English letters and sounds or pronunciation are different. Like the pronunciation of the in the words thin and then will be different. In the word thin, pronunciation is notated visually as thin, while then is notated as then. The writing of letters and sound of their pronunciation will be clearly distinguished by using brackets or italics. 8. Words or meanings. Sometimes the types of words and their meanings are a little confusing. For example, the word fox can be described as noun, but can be interpreted as mammal. To help distinguish between them, linguists use italic for words and quotation marks for meanings. For example, the word fox is noun, but fox with quotation mark is a mammal. 9th, punctuation or grammatical structure. The discussion of grammar structure is quite difficult when compared to the discussion of punctuation. Student knowledge about punctuation such as dot, commas, exclamation points, capital letters, and so on will be useless if they do not understand about the grammar. Okay, now the next discussion is about linguistic models. There are 3 types of linguistic models: generative, systemic, and cognitive linguistic. Generative linguistic by Chomsky characterized that humans have had the ability to speak language since they were born and have a special part of the brain about language called language acquisition device, or LAD. This model argues that despite language exercises, if humans don't have LAD, then they cannot speak. The second model is systemic linguistic by Halliday. Seeing the texts, which are formed in the opinion of systemic linguists, are always generated in context, that the meaning of language is found in the text as whole and not in separate sentences. How language is used at the text level, not at the word for word and sentence level separately. The third linguist model is cognitive linguist. Another case, linguist which argues that a person's language skills are a form of manifestation of one's cognitive maturity. This ability will develop and grow gradually according to the experience he is experiencing. In other words, the stages of language development are determined by the stages of cognitive development. So the conclusion is education needs linguists in several different curriculum subjects and even in all curriculum subjects. Popular culture already has a kind of linguist theory for thinking and talking about language. Literacy promotes a number of undesirable tendencies, and the professional linguistic theory is more or less successful in avoiding all these tendencies. Thank you.
Well, that's all for our presentation. I think it's still far from the complete and perfect one, and we apologize for all the mistakes we have made. Thank you so much for watching. Have a nice day and see you. Billahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.